Personalization. It's my new favorite word. I'm using it all the time because when I found out what it was, I realized that it was describing all the behaviors that I still had left inside me that I didn't like, that was still causing problems. And so, while it's not my intention to get too personal about my own journey in this video, we'll see if Matt brings it out of me. It has been so rich and rewarding to be able to speak about long-standing issues and problems with this terminology of personalization, because it casts such a good light on the actual core of the issue and then gives you actionable steps in order to move away from it. And so I was being desperate to bring this to you guys because I feel like if it's helped me a lot, it's going to be able to help you. So even though this isn't specifically about gender, although I am going to ask Matt at some point whether or not he thinks personalization is more typical of men or women, it is an issue that I would imagine is causing the majority of fights and arguments inside couples. So, as far as I know, personalization is a word that comes from cognitive behavioral therapy, of which Matt knows a lot more than I do. So I'm going to give my basic sort of layman's understanding from it. But if I miss any points of this, Matt, that you think are important for the audience to know, can you just tidy me up at the end? So,
Happily.
from what I can tell, the concept of personalization is the idea of taking a neutral event and then ascribing it to have personal significance to you where it's not actually appropriate to do so. So, for example, if you miss the bus because you were late or the bus came early and you're like, the world fucking hates me, you know, why has this happened to me? That's an example of you personalizing that issue. Or if you know, for example, that your girlfriend has like a thing about like dirty dishes or whatever like that, and then she's like, oh, I hate how dirty this dish is while she's scrubbing it, and you're like, is she saying I'm too messy as an eater? Is she saying I don't deserve to eat food on my own plates or something like that? And you personalize it, then that becomes a problem. And where this causes a lot of arguments for couples, and dare I say almost every argument inside a relationship, is the codependence of confusing what is a neutral event from another person and what you take personally. So somebody might just be going about their life, doing what they do, la da 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 da, but something that they do, one of their behaviors, mirrors some problematic behavior that that person experienced in a previous relationship or in their childhood or something like that, and they take it personally. When this person doesn't respond to me straight away in like a text, it means I'm going to be abandoned or something like that. No, it actually means that person hasn't seen your text message yet, or in their value system, it's not important to respond straight away. So why I find this quite uplifting, I suppose, is that this is an opportunity to engage with reality more. Because if you can think of personalization as a kind of distortion lens that you have over your eyes, where you're looking about the world and you're taking things personally as though they have special significance to you when they really don't, then you can work on decoupling that experience from that personalization interpretation and then see reality a lot more clearly. And then you're so much nicer to everybody and you're so much nicer to the world because you're not recreating old traumas and personal dramas as an opportunity to bring up those issues that you never actually grieved the corresponding emotions for back when those traumatic incidents first occurred. A little bit more than just a definition, but Matt, jump in at the important aspects of personalization I didn't touch on.
No, that was marvelous. That was really well done. You even used the word distortion, which the only thing I would add, not that it needs adding, but I just want to bracket it theoretically for those of you who are curious, is cognitive behavioral therapy talks about things called cognitive distortions, which you can think of as a form of psychological logical fallacy, right? And it's a pattern of negative, often negative thinking that results in pain and distress and anxiety and just generalized discomfort. That is often based off of bad logic and usually hidden assumptions that are not cashed out by reality. And so there are various cognitive distortions. Personalization is one of the more common ones. Another one you've likely heard about is something called catastrophizing, which means to make something a really big deal, like even when it's not. For example, a common one, because I'm in university, is if you get a B on a test, that means you won't get an A in the class, which means you'll never get into grad school, which means you'll never get your dream career, which means that you'll never meet the woman who will love you because you won't make enough money, which means, it's on and on and on. You basically make it so that your life is going to be over and you're going to die alone and miserable and suffering because you got a B on a test. Like, that's just a massive series of leaps that are not justified. So that's catastrophizing. black and white thinking is one, mind reading is another one. There's lots of common cognitive distortions. It's worth taking the time to become a bit educated on cognitive behavioral therapy and this list of distortions, because you're going to start seeing them internally and externally, daily, hourly, and holy shit, it's a revolution when you have words for these things and you can call them out.
Oh, so good. It's like you're aware of the territory inside your mind, but often it's a little bit blurry. Learning the language is such a useful tool for mapping it out, and then you find you're able to navigate it so much more. And I think I've been guilty in the past of being a bit dismissive of cognitive behavioral therapy, and I probably still am, but that's a much bigger discussion. I'm not as big a fan.
It's just one tool among many.
Yeah. But one of the reasons I suppose I've always had an objection to it, or I've not been such a big advocate of it, is it has seemed a little bit like, oh, this is trying to get us away from reality. These are self-hypnosis tricks. These are ways to sort of manipulate your mind and frame it in new ways to try and sort of empower yourself. I'm like, no, like I'm always like, no, let's get to reality. But actually, in terms of those distortions, reality is the focus. It's just saying you're not seeing reality accurately. And so those CBT techniques are really nothing more than trying to snap you back to what reality is. And in that sense, I couldn't be more strongly on board. So I'm going to have another look at CBT to actually see to what degree I've just been affected by my own prejudice, or if there are more tools there that I can actually use in my own life.
I mean, perhaps someone would disagree with this, but as far as I understand and as far as I practice CBT, the foundational claim in CBT is that reality is friendly, right? You are likely to do better in life if you're in contact with the facts, and and then the other piece is that you focus on what you can actually influence, and you do your best to let go of things that you can't. And with reality and what's called the dichotomy of control, those two together, you're very likely going to live a much happier life.
Cool. Well, that's a good foundation then for understanding where this personalization concept has come from within this bigger umbrella of CBT. But let's get back to personalization. Let's make it personal. Matt, is this an issue? Is this a distortion that you've suffered with in your life?
Historically, yes, especially as a teenager. And it's quite common. I'd say at this point I have overcorrected, and I'm now learning to personalize a little bit more, because it's extremely easy for me to depersonalize, not in the usual sense of the word, but to take nothing personally. I really got drunk on the Four Agreements at one point, and I still like that philosophy, but to take nothing personally to the point where I actually don't learn from the damage that I cause, because I just assume it's a them problem. And so I'm learning now to moderate and say, okay, while it's not personal in the sense that my essence is not tarnished by this bad behavior, and it's not a reflection of my inherent corruption as a person, I do still need to care enough about it and associate it enough with myself such that I actually improve my behavior and become a better person. And so I'm finding that balance now, but at the moment I'm skewing more towards not taking anything personally.
So it just in case, because there's a lot of terminology used there, I just want to try and put what Matt said into more like layman's kind of terms. If you're like, if people are saying like, hey, that behavior of yours hurt me, and what Matt's kind of saying is that he's got such an understanding of how people are like triggered by their own stuff, and they've got cognitive distortions, interpretations. He's kind of gotten to the point where he's like, oh yeah, like you're hurt by me, no worries. Like he's not really going like, therefore I need to make changes. He's more likely to just sort of dismiss it. And he's gone a little bit too far with that. He needs to be paying a little bit more attention to like, okay, yes, I actually was doing something hurtful like that. But mostly people are not on Matt's side of the spectrum. For the most part, people default much more towards codependency. So that if someone's like, you know, when you threw your tissue at the bin and you missed and you didn't pick it up, that brought up like in crazy like anger and sadness for me. Too many people are like, whoa, I am so sorry. Like, yes, I can completely understand why you're upset. More people need to be like, yep, that was a shit thing for me to do. But holy crap, your reaction has got to do with you. I can't take that personally. But the problem, it's a lot of men, unfortunately, they virtue signal in the wrong direction, because they think that taking things really personally and taking responsibility for the other person's emotions is doing some kind of favor to that person, you know, like, right, I can see that you're in this amount of pain. Now I'm going to accept personal responsibility as though the things I do are the cause of that instead of just the trigger. Like, no, I'm responsible. I'll try and fix things and change that. And men think that they're going to be able to handle that, and they vastly overestimate their own emotional capacity. Very few men can do it. And the ones that can do it are kind of a bit like, masochistic, like they're doing it to torture themselves in some kind of weird, distorted way. And what inevitably happens is that when you start taking things personally, you unconsciously start shutting down the other person's expression of what's bothering them. So just to put this in a basic kind of example, like every time I just do something normal to me, like I leave I hang up my towel in the bathroom badly. She loses her mind, really badly, and then I feel like real shit because I'm like, I can't believe I caused such upset in my partner. For the first couple of times, you might apologize, but inevitably, you will start to get angry at that person and you'll be like, why are you making me feel so bad about me just making a simple mistake about how I hang my towel? You know what I mean? And you start wanting them to censor themselves so that they don't make you feel responsible for that. And that's how couples stop talking. It's that codependence where both people are taking something personally that's not actually personal. Whereas if you can decouple what your partner or even your friend or your family member, whoever the other person you're in a relationship with, if you can decouple what they're going through emotionally from yourselves, then you can freely allow them to express what it is that they need to express and to explore their emotions, and even temporarily let them project it all on you, knowing deep down that it's not personal. And then once they've got that out, they're like, whoa, there's some really big feelings there. Like, I can tell it's a big deal for you. And she's like, yeah, okay, that was good. I really need to get that out. It's like, do you know, I didn't actually intend to make you feel that way. At the end, she's like, I know, I've got something, I think it stems back to this, stems back to that. A lot of guys, they get so caught up in that first trap of personalization. It's like, why do you think I'm like this terrible person who's doing things to be mean to you or whatever? And they miss the opportunity to just allow the other person to have their own space while you don't take it personally. And then you can actually make some progress into what is the inherent cause behind that other person's emotion. Because if you get defensive, from the first instance, and you'll take it personally, then you just have an argument about, well, whose fault is it really? You don't actually get to explore any of the deeper issues.
So much amazing advice. Wow. Yeah. It's the only thing I would ask you to follow up from that, because that is exactly what you should do. And that's exactly what I do. In fact, probably this is why I have developed this overcompensation bias, is because I've gotten very good at not taking things personally, even when it's thrown directly in my face. And it's a hell of a lot less anxiety provoking to live that way. But it does have that danger, which is that you don't actually take action on the basis of someone else's being upset. The question I have for you as a follow-up is, how does one develop the ability to not take things personally?
Honestly, from as far as I can tell, the only really way out of it is to discharge or grieve the emotions behind the reason why you're taking something personally. So I'll just make this personal for me. Like, for example, like when I was a child growing up in my family, I was often accused of having motives that I didn't have, as like adults or older children were like abusing me or whatever like that. They were just projecting onto me all of their worst thoughts about themselves that they couldn't take ownership of. So it was a very, very disconcerting experience to me, constantly being told who I am. And I'm thinking, I don't have any of the dark thoughts that you guys are accusing me of. And so where I struggle, like in relationships now, is it will be a trigger for me if somebody says something that I could interpret as though they're telling me I have motives that I don't really have. And I feel that strong need to like assert morality. And it's like, no, my internal life, what I'm thinking is not the way that you're pursuing it. But I've learned to be able to not take those situations personally, not through any like mind trick or technique, but by finding therapists, loved ones, co-counselors, where I've talked endlessly about how much it sucked to be on the receiving end of abuse. And then I've been able to discharge my emotions, primarily grief. There's some fear, there's some sadness, there's some anger. But those emotions, once they're actually felt, acknowledged, validated, they've kind of been released. And so I don't have that emotional charge inside me that's always waiting for an opportunity to come out. Because my theory on how emotions work and why they recreate themselves in present situations is that deep down, your brain wants you to feel all the unfelt emotions from your past, all the awful things that happened to you. You want to feel awful about them. All the scary things, you want to feel scared about it, because otherwise they stay as repressed emotions and they manifest in deeply problematic kind of unconscious behavior. So if you can make them conscious and release them, then they're not going to play out in their lives. But if you're not doing that work, here's what happens is your brain is so desperate for you to release those emotions that it purposely interprets situations happening now through that historical lens so that you can have those emotions again. Like, oh, this situation, now that I'm 45, but this dynamic, this conversation is exactly like the one that happened when I was 8 years old. It's not, but your brain convinces you that it is so that those same emotions can come out so that hopefully it can finally be discharged. But that's a bad way to go about it. It's somewhat inevitable being in a relationship, but the problem is that if you're relying on natural triggers to occur, you're more likely to start burning bridges and not actually understand what's going on. And you take things personally and you think that the other person really is out to get you when actually it's just your interpretations that's the problem. And so you're using your personal relationships as a form of therapy in a really destructive and unhelpful way. What you need to do is actually take responsibility. I know I have stuff. I know I have unreasonably strong reactions and take things personally when I shouldn't. Let me take that away from this person who's triggering me in this real relationship to a trusted professional, a good friend, a family member who you can get on really well with, and start talking about it, start releasing it there so that that emotional discharge happens. You free yourself, you move through those emotions. When the next thing happens, your interpretation in personalization isn't there because it's not looking for an opportunity to recreate that drama, to recreate that trauma, because you've already done it. That's the way through it, as far as I can tell.
Part of the reason why I love talking to you and listening to you in your videos where I'm not a part of, right? I get such a joy because you express therapy and self-work from a very kind of classical psychoanalytic perspective, which frankly I'm not very steeped in, and also I tend to bias slightly away from for specific reasons. We end up in the same place, and this is often how things are with us. We end up in a very similar place in terms of action, in terms of philosophy, but the way you construct how the mind works and how processing of emotions works is very much classically psychoanalytic, and it's beautiful. I come from more of a behaviorist perspective, which is usually much simpler in the sense of your mind isn't trying to kind of do something and create. There's not an intelligence in there that's like, trying to work through stuff, which is it's a powerful concept and it does make sense. I think my belief system imputes a little bit more kind of clumsiness and frankly just stupidity in the human brain, and that it's just mostly fault. This is another basis of CBT that you probably would disagree with, is that fundamentally emotions are a result of irrational thought, right? Negative emotions are a result of irrational thought. Whereas for you, negative emotions are a little bit more intelligent and have more of a place. And so that particular paradigm of CBT, you probably wouldn't subscribe to.
Correct, yeah.
But for me, I didn't actually do your method of dealing with personalization in exactly that way. There was some of that, which is essentially that I would very, very highly summarize at a very shallow level as just making sense of the emotion, right? Understanding the logic and what's actually happening and why it's there. But fundamentally, the way I actually changed it was through meditation, which is becoming deeply familiar with the thoughts that emerge in the mind, learning to assess them through CBT methods, like logically analyzing them through Socratic questioning, and then learning to depersonalize from my own thoughts. Even as a thought comes up and say, just because I think it doesn't mean it's actually true, right? This is the essence of meditation, is don't even take your own thoughts personally. And then once you have that skill down, then someone else's thoughts, it's a no-brainer. And so it's a radically different way of getting there, but ultimately it does result in you having this open, confident, rooted space where someone else can throw stuff on you because they're working through it, and you can say, oh, you threw this right on me, and I can take it right off, and I'm still here for you, and then you're all good.
I think that you actually did a really fantastic summary of you and I, like we have that different approach to doing things. So
It's come up a lot, yeah.
Yeah, it has come up a lot. So I think Matt did a really good job of explaining how it sort of works for him. And as far as I can tell, it does work for him, right? Like, I'm not saying it, obviously, the experiment on it could be lifelong. From my perspective, I would call mine greedier. You know what I mean? And harder. I think mine takes more courage because I can see your approach very much appealing to men in particular who are looking for some technique that will work, that doesn't involve feeling the emotions that make them feel vulnerable. They want some kind of concept, some hack, and meditation could just be a way of like, no, I'm just hacking my brain in certain ways, depersonalizing my own thoughts. And you can do it well enough. And the brain is highly plastic. It can be very,
Yeah.
very effective. But why I say that I think I'm greedier is because I don't really want to create a mind in the future, like from now, that is better. That is like, oh, I've had my old way of doing things, my old emotions, but now I'm creating a new place and I'm making it better and better and better. It's a fun place to hang out. I'm more interested in going right back to the very earliest experiences I had and then taking all of that and then thoroughly feeling, thoroughly analyzing, and then turning them all into something better. So I would say that mine is more inclusive because as far as I can tell, while you're probably taking 75% of your past experience is integrated and then 100% of your future, I keep feeling like there'd be 25% of me that's missing. And so if I want an experience of absolute equanimity, complete inner peace, there can't be any part of me and any part of my experience that I've ever rejected, that I've ever ignored, that I've ever explained away or rationalized away or moved away. I'm like, no, every single thing had some purpose and I want it all. I want it all back. I'm greedy. I want every single part of me to come to this party. I think it's harder. I do. I think it requires a lot of courage and it's not easy. But I think ultimately where I'm sitting, why I'm not convinced by yours, is I think that my end result's going to be more fun. I think I'm going to be happier than I would be doing yours. It might be a temperamental thing. What's working for me probably wouldn't work for you. What's working for you probably wouldn't work for me. So it's not like one's better than the other necessarily. But that's why I think we can sit here and have this this discussion and ultimately finish in disagreement. You know, because I think, we've each gone far enough down our own path to know that it works enough for us that we're probably not going to change. But for guys who are listening to this right now going, shit, I don't know which one it is. First of all, I'll say there's 90% overlap and you can learn something from both of them. But it might be quite useful after this discussion to kind of clarify, okay, which of these paths am I more interested in, the Matt way or the Alex way?
Now, I don't think the reason why I'm disagreeing about us disagreeing in the sense that I don't think your method is bad for you by any means. If you were to make the claim that my method is insufficient for me because my method is insufficient for you, that I would disagree with, but you're not making that claim. But there's this new principle emerging in a lot of health, right? Physical health, medicine and whatnot, of what's called bioindividuality, which is that, surprise, different bodies are different, right? Different genetics are different, different organs respond to different types of things. And so it makes sense to tailor one's medicine to more specific details of their physiology. And I'm looking forward to that expanding into psychology, expanding into therapy, so that we recognize that there are many paths that ultimately are going to get you towards health, integration, joy, peace, more love, connection, all those things. And so frankly, the way I would recommend if someone's feeling like they're starting a sort of psychological journey and they don't know where to go is to try a bunch of stuff. It's kind of like if you want to learn about music, listen to a bunch of different types of music. Some stuff is going to catch you and it's going to really resonate with you. Follow that for a while. Some stuff is going to feel like it just doesn't do it for you either way. Maybe put it down, maybe look at it later. Some stuff is going to utterly repel you and you're going to want to pay extra attention to that kind of stuff. But ultimately, the path you follow is almost certainly going to, be relatively narrow for what works for you. And I think you should accept that and expect that and even enjoy the idiosyncrasy of your own journey. Now, I do want to make one more point for on this is that in mysticism and, nirvana, enlightenment, this kind of idea, there tends to be two paths that I've seen discussed and that I think make sense. Is that one path is the become everything approach, where you become one with the entire universe. And then the other path is the release everything approach, where you become essentially nothing. And they both seem to promise this calm, stable, smooth, self-acceptance and peace and joy and love that's kind of at the end of both tunnels. And so your approach feels a little bit more like expand and become the entirety of your existence. Totally. And my approach is a little bit more release this, release that, release everything, netty, not that, right? Until you become essentially the equivalent of nothing, which means you sort of become everything at the same time. And so it's one of those illusory differences that horseshoes back and then we land at the same happy place.
Fascinating.
Yeah, isn't that fun?
Oh, it's bringing back all my Buddhist, like my years experimenting with all those philosophies.
I'm still there.
Yeah. I moved on, but I don't mind that you're still there.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't doing it for you. That's fine.
No, but again, it's difficult to know to what degree that stuff did sort of influence me. But you're exactly right. Is that I feel so greedy that there's not much in life that I really want to turn back from. I love my emotions. I love that I feel so deeply when I contemplate nature, when I contemplate people, when I contemplate art and media. I wouldn't ever want to have a thought that I depersonalized myself from. And I don't really, and I found myself, I just watched the documentary on Netflix about that awful earthquake in Nepal in 2015 that hit Kathmandu and Everest and this place called the Langtang Valley. And you know, it's tough to watch that suffering of people, but there's heroism and there's courage and there's beauty in it as well. And I just felt so many things watching that documentary. And I heard this saying recently. It's like a quote from a famous writer. Forgive me, I don't know the source, but nothing that is human is alien to me. And it's that sort of invitation that if anything that any human anywhere has experienced, it's kind of an invitation to try and find that part of yourself for the darkest and for the best. And what a huge spectrum. And so I can see the difference that you pointed out between us, Matt, manifesting in some of the other discussions that we've had. But yeah. You've summarized me. You know me really well, because it's like a yes. I'm trying to dive right into all of it, whereas I can see that you're separating yourself from it. But in essence, it seems to me like you're emptying yourself so more of it can come in. But that's kind of the point of where it all empties out. It all connects back at the top again. I rambled a little bit. I just so enjoyed your last monologue there. I'm happy to start moving towards finishing up the video before we make this one too long.
Yeah,
but
yeah, me too. If I could just agree with you and your approach in one particular domain of my life, this is where music comes in for me, because music is my method of experiencing the whole spectrum of the human emotional scale, right? The greatest joys and the greatest darkness, I can find that in music. And so that's where I turn for that experience. And it's much less linguistic. It's much more embodied. It's much more purely emotional. And so because I've gotten so comfortable in that outlet, both listening and creating, because I like to play music, then I'm sort of, I feel a certain sense like I can almost compartmentalize that work to that domain and then leave my intellectual philosophizing to the reduce everything to nothing approach. But I do like to integrate the two where I can. We'll see what happens. I mean, for God's sakes, we're both very young, so let's check back in 30 years and see how much more. It's probably much more simple this philosophy becomes for both of us.
My theory is that people will stop identifying with all the negative stuff, but they'll leave the good stuff for last. You know what I mean? Like,
oh sure, yeah.
They'll be like, I'm not this sadness, I'm not this, but I am this huge success I'm experiencing. That's all me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a little dangerous too. So this is why you got non-discrimination, right? Like you're all of it or you're none of it. Pick one.
I would also be curious. No, I know I said I'd wrap up the video, but I've got to ask this. I feel like that would affect my sex drive. Quite frankly, like I feel like if I was disidentifying from my own experiences and instincts, it would hold me one step back, removed from the absolute surrender into flesh and instinct that I enjoy in sex. And I don't know, I'm guessing that's probably going to be the last thing that you give up in terms of your journey to disidentify from things. But I would be curious to know if you'd be able to even get erections once you, like if monks actually get turned on, you know what I mean? Or if they're just that removed from their own humanity that they don't experience that.
Boy, that's a good question. We should ask some monks. They're in good monk mode. I could tell you my personal experience. I mean, you could ask my partner. It's my sex drive is
bring her on.
Not going. I wish. She's making dinner right now downstairs. Certainly not gone away. So if that means that my philosophy is compatible with sexuality, I'll take it. And if that means that it actually hasn't penetrated deep enough to actually upend my sexuality, then consider me a self-contradicted. But I like my sex drive, and I don't expect it to go away anytime soon.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch this space. So let's kick it over to the comments section we'll simplify all this nuance and depth with this question. Are you a Matt or are you an Alex? Like, which one do you resonate more?
Oh, God. That'll be fun. Yeah, let's see what happens.
I do apologize for, I know I promised that we'd talk about whether personalization affected men or women more. To return to that at this stage of the conversation seems a little bit trite. I think I might save that because I'd like to have a conversation about like Karens and like main character syndrome and the sort of...
The answer is women.
but I want to explore more
Yeah.
why that might is. But we'll save that for another video. So if you can
Yeah.
just be patient, we'll return to that for anyone who's really keen to have that discussion.
Yeah, actually, just very my singular sentence on that topic is I think the answer is women, and it's actually because men are more likely to do what I do, which is to reject taking things personally all the way, which eventually develops into narcissistic personality disorder, which you can do no wrong because there's no one there to do it, and that's a much more male typical thing. Women do the personalization and therefore get more depression and anxiety, which we see represented. So that's my personal belief.
Yeah, mine also. But we'll get into that with more
Great,
depth
we
another
agree.
thing. All right, see you guys. I'll see you in the next one.